The people who have been through the abyss and come out the other side, those are the greatest people we have. There's parts of us that have to die for another part to be born. It's the deciding. The word decide has the same root as the words homicide or suicide, and it means to cut or kill in Latin. Vision is the most important thing leaders can do, and Napoleon calls leaders dealers in hope. If we lose that, then you see the raw, dysfunctional tribalism we're experiencing today.
How can we try to get initiated, to stop being these mature adolescents?
Artificial times require artificial means, so we need to artificially create community now because it's not going to happen otherwise.
Thank you for coming on, Philip. It's great to see you.
Cheers.
Oh, you're cheersing me.
Cheers.
A little ceremony. Rituals.
Yes, and in the medieval courts, this is a ritual of trust and safety that we used to poison each other so much that we would slosh wine back and forth.
So we would pour some of my cup into your cup to prevent...
We would slosh back and forth and then make eye contact while we drink. And that way you've ensured that you're not being poisoned.
I see. So you're not poisoning me.
Correct.
Perfect.
Nor myself.
I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But you're an anthropologist, you're ex-Army, and you're a leadership coach at very large companies such as SpaceX, Tesla, Red Bull. So you know a lot about human psychology, about how humans behave, how cultures evolve. You have this new book, Team to Tribe, and in it you talk about how to create a culture of winning, of high performance within a team, a family, and any organization or structure, right? And in it, you talk about alignment, you talk about kinship, you talk about healthy conflict, and you talk about sustainable success. And I want to first go through all of these four with you and have you tell me a little bit about them. So we can start with alignment. What is alignment?
Well, just backing up a little bit, the thrust of my work would seem to be high performance, because that's a relevant dynamic with humanity, is that we want to get our needs met and we want to achieve and thrive. And in business, those are called profit drivers, is that they want innovation, they want competitiveness and efficiency and engagement and retention, because that's what makes them money. So they hire me for that. My secret agenda around doing team development through an anthropological lens is that I'm here for the kinship. I'm here for the resiliency, the mental health, the meaning, the purpose, the significant impact that human beings need to feel successful in their life. And we have a kinship shaped hole in our heart as a society because we're designed for deep, intimate connections with other members of our tribe that provides us with trust and safety and resiliency, and that's where we get our meaning from. And we're a society that has currently lost our kinship systems, and therefore we've lost all of that trust, safety, meaning, purpose. And so people are desperately spinning to try to find that. And so my work of reintroducing kinship systems or honor-based culture back into society is really addressing our core human destiny or legacy of kinship. But the downstream effect of that is that it makes people ferociously effective, high-performing, adaptable, successful. So there's pretty much two big agendas that culture answers. And I'm really interested on the resiliency, the human experience. And I totally acknowledge that organizations, whether they be sports teams or big corporations, they're looking at the performance part. Yeah. And they're both valid end games. But for me, the kinship piece is clutch.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've lost historically these structures that held together society. They used to be religions. Now politics has somewhat taken a bit of that role. Religions were what created community. It created kinship between each other. We were selfless and we were rewarded in an afterlife, right? And I think I'm curious about, why is your avenue or your agenda in creating more kinship in a modern lens aimed at corporations or teams that are trying to be high performers?
I ask this question almost every program or keynote that I'm doing with people. Where do you spend most of your waking hours?
At work.
And they say, well, here, at work. With whom do you spend most of your waking hours? With these people. So work and your coworkers are the most important things in your life. And they're like, no. I'm not going to own that. But it's irrefutable. If that's what you're doing with most of your life, and those are the people you're doing that with, and if you've surrendered that as a primary source of meaning and fulfillment, then you've lost the center of the chessboard.
Yeah.
And you're not going to win the game trying to play on the edges. And those are the people who are desperately trying to find meaning in their 2-week vacation every year, or going to Burning Man and just, trying to gather meaning through that. It has to be at what we're doing regularly. Mm-hmm. So culture is the number one driver of resiliency and performance. And it has 8 times the efficacy of investing in either strategy or technology. I mean, it is the big driver.
Yeah.
And that's fairly well established. And that series of questions of, so where are you doing, the things you're doing with most of your life, that has to be answered. And so people need to be able to look at, and then we're going to start with alignment, is what is something that is aspirational enough that it's worth offering you my sword? Because that's what the knights would do. When they would find a lord, whether it be a samurai or a medieval knight, is like, this is me. This is everything I have. And so you offer your sword to something. And that's your vision. That's an organizational vision. It's the thing that answers the why are they there. And if it's a shallow vision of we're here to make money, that's what you're going to give the sword of your life to. And it's shallow. It's unfulfilling. And so when we look at culture creation, that's the first thing we lead with is your big why. And Nietzsche talks about the why. If you can have that big why, then you have engagement, you have retention, you have buy-in, you have the ability to persevere with grit and resiliency because it's significant enough that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it.
Yep. He who has a why can bear anyhow.
Yeah. So, I use wolves as a very good analogy, something that we'll talk about, but the wolves are not scavengers and they're not rabbit hunters. Wolves hunt big game because it's fulfilling, it's meaningful, it's significant. They're designed at a cellular level to hunt significant things. And that's their vision. Their vision is not to survive scavenging or to hunt mice and rabbits. Like they find fulfillment in pulling down big game.
Yeah.
Everyone eats. So vision is the most important thing leaders can do. And Napoleon calls leaders dealers in hope. That's really what a vision is here is a future that does not currently exist that we can commit to. It's the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
And without a Holy Grail, the knights will turn on themselves. They'll turn on the people. We need to be questing.
Yeah.
So that's the first pillar of alignment.
Yeah. So how do you think about this concept of work-life balance, work-life harmony when we're talking about this is where we spend most of our time at work, yet most people want to have a level of alignment in the sense that they don't want to spend all their time at work, right? Mm-hmm. They want to have fun outside of it. They want to have other relationships outside of it. And even if, let's say, we have a strong why at work, how are we integrating that within the rest of our lives, right? So how are you thinking about those things?
Well, there's obviously a big overlap of where we spend most of our time and the need for fulfillment there. But then we also have to have a reintegration back home. And that's part of you can call it a warrior reintegration strategy, which every culture in the history of our species has had people that go off and do hard things and then be able to transition back home again successfully.
Yeah.
And that dynamic is missing in our culture.
Yeah.
When the knights came back from the Crusades, they took their armor off at the church.
Yeah.
And they did the rosary, and they walked the labyrinth, and they wrote love letters, and they reintegrated back home.
Yeah.
The samurai did the same thing. Every warrior culture, the people who are doing significant, potentially trauma-inducing activities have to be able to reintegrate back home in some capacity. Otherwise, you have to wall it off, which is what so many people are doing. Is that's work, and then this is me at home.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to do that psychologically. Like, we need to be able to have an acknowledgement of it needs to be fulfilling at work. I need to be engaged fully. And currently, less than 17% of Americans are fully engaged in their jobs. So that's catastrophic. How much we're leaving on the table of our people, our communities, our organizations, our society itself.
And our lives too,
Yeah.
right? If I'm not engaged at work and I'm spending 40 hours a week at a desk doing something I don't enjoy, like half of my life is essentially disappearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's the best of you. And that analogy of the chessboard position is more important than pieces. You should be willing to sacrifice a piece to gain position. So those 4 squares in the middle, that's how you control a chessboard. And so whatever those 4 squares are in our life is where we're spending most of our time. And there are people who work from home. You better get that tight. Whatever it is people are doing in their life, make sure that those 4 center squares are aligned with our vision, our values, and our mission.
Yeah. How are you thinking about this concept of alignment aimed at leaders at building a culture of success versus an individual? And maybe it's me, maybe it's you, maybe somebody going into a desk job, maybe they're working in a corporate structure. It feels very lifeless. They're one of those 83% of people that aren't engaged at work. How can they take this concept of alignment, of finding that why within their work and making sure they're not wasting that time and make sure that they're living that?
Most people, if you ask them what the vision of their life is, they won't have an answer, because we're not a culture that has held that as a priority. But in most other eras, if you were to pose that question, there's an answer. And it's going to have to do with, at an adolescent level, ambition. It's glory. The bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is your basic needs. So that's the adolescent version. As people progress in life, in the pursuit of meaning, then at some point it's connected to service, to something larger than yourself. That is very directly a form of initiation into an adult psychology. An adolescent psychology, which is based on external gratification or immediate gratification, that's a shallow currency. And as soon as you start going through the initiation rite of passage process of, okay, what is life really about? It's always going to have to do with service to others. That is swapping out the prince psychology to the king psychology. And so service and meaning to something bigger than yourself is always going to be that higher level. And so individually, when I'm doing executive coaching, it's like, what are you here for? What do you stand for? What is your ethos? What is your code? And that's really what your vision and your values are, is that thing that makes up your identity. It's your brand, it's your reputation. And when you hear somebody who has a vision, it resonates and it differentiates you from everyone else in the world. And I also encourage people who are watching, this should be something that your family has. Your family should have you don't have to call it a vision statement, but it should be something that you can raise up the flagpole and go, that's what we're here for.
This reminds me of an idea that Naval Ravikant likes to talk about, which is becoming one of one. And finding
Blue Ocean.
Finding the one thing that is so you that there's nobody else that does it.
Yep.
There's nobody that can be better than you at being you. And so maybe what I'm taking from what you're saying is that as individuals, we should be continually striving to find that thing. And we might not know it yet. Maybe we are at that disengagement level, that 83%.
It's your competitive advantage is being that person that defines the blue ocean. There's no other fish that are hunting here. And people are afraid of doing that because to be blue ocean or to have a narrow brand, a narrow target audience, an ideal customer means you're saying no to all the other customers. And that's a terrifying thing for people who are part of a pride-based culture, is that they're basically scavengers. And the moment you say, I'm hunting, I'm not scavenging, then you've just shut down all of the things that you have managed to survive by. But it's a brave and needed transition to, if you want to get to the big game hunt, you have to pick a target. You're not just going out, whatever I can do, whoever I can meet, whoever I can connect with. It's like, no, I have my person, I have the thing that I provide. That's your brand. That's the tight brand. You want to be identified as, oh, you're that person. Earlier in my career, I used to attempt to dress in a manner that would allow me to easily engage with clients. So if I was going to go work at a bank or a big law firm, I would wear a suit. And I started to get this feedback that they wanted the anthropologist in the vest that they saw in the video. Like, where's the vest? And, where's the khaki? Where's the... And I realized that I had permission. In fact, I have received the call to adventure to be the person that provides something. That's why, I am that one of one. And everybody should be able to have something that they can identify as providing value. And that you do have to provide value, which is not a power question. It's a value question. And all hierarchies are built on value. And it's indispensable before you make a fluffy vision statement, which is prevalent today, particularly in men's work, is, I'm going to be a breathwork coach. I'm going to be they're providing something that they believe is a form of value. But unless your clients acknowledge that that's value, so it does need to have some efficacy behind it. And the greatest efficacy is going to be, how are you living your life? So as soon as you start transitioning into that one of one, I'm a person to be providing some value to people, you need to get your own house in order. You need to be somebody who is modeling that, because our lives are evidence of our efficacy. And that's a brave and very revealing process, to continually look at ourselves and say, am I modeling the things that I'm providing? Because you don't want to hire a fat trainer. You don't want to hire a single relationship coach. You don't want to hire a broke financial coach. So you have to be that person before you can really, put that flag in the sand. As soon as you go public with that vision, you need to make sure that you're living it.
Yeah. I think that the results that someone has brought in their own lives is a heuristic for the effectiveness of their training, their coaching, etc. And I think a lot of people want to start on a thing. They're like, I want to be a personal trainer, or I want to be a leadership coach such as you. But no one's going to trust your brand unless you can prove that you've already done it yourself.
Yeah.
And you said one more interesting thing, which is about this blue ocean thinking leading us down another path that looks similar but doesn't get us quite there. And I think this happens a lot in entrepreneurship, people trying to start their own thing. They might sit around with their friends and say, I have this great idea for this app. Everyone's going to love it. And they spend 2 years building the app, release it. Nobody wants it, right? They think they're doing blue ocean. Nobody's thought of this before, but they've never validated that people want it, that they have the value.
Yeah.
Right.
What you think is valuable for people is irrelevant. It really is. It is what they value. And that doesn't have to be a mercenary, manipulative pivot. It should be in alignment. The thing that you're providing to the world should be the thing that you believe is valuable, but it also has some legitimate efficacy to it because it's worked with you, and then it's worked with your family, and it's worked with your past clients. And at that point, there's a different level of legitimacy to that statement. Yeah,
definitely. And we also talked about leaving opportunities on the table when following this strategy of of individualizing oneself in what they do, is that it can feel as though I'm leaving opportunity on the table. If I create a brand where I am Philip Folsom, leadership coach, anthropologist, I can no longer be something else. And it might feel like, oh, but all those clients want this thing. I want to get them there. The thinking makes sense. Like, I've fallen into this before. It's like, but they want this. I'll do what they want. But no, you want them coming to you for what you provide.
It's a race to the bottom. The red ocean is a race to the bottom. Because as soon as you've joined what everybody else is doing, then at some point you're going to have to differentiate yourself by something. And
price.
Usually it's going to be price, service, quality. Like, you're going to have to start degrading all of that. Yeah, and there's been many times in my career where I've had to do that. There's numerous clients that I have chosen not to work with because it's not a good match in terms of, you call it my integrity. Like, I don't agree with that. So that is a sacrifice on the altar of what your brand is.
Yeah. And how did that feel when you had to turn away clients to pursue your brand, your integrity?
See, it kind of depends the season. If I'm doing really well, it feels really good. It's scary otherwise, and I guess to have a measure of success, to be able to do that, it's easier. It makes sense. It's altruistic. But when people are struggling, then there is a certain amount of practicality. You can call it compromise. So,
yeah, sometimes we compromise our values for the outcome.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah. You mentioned initiation within people who don't really have a vision. They have a fluffy vision of what they want. It's not thought out. It's not well defined. When going from that vision to, I know what I want, I know who I am, what have initiations looked like from an anthropological lens that you've seen?
First of all, initiation, just like reintegration, is universal in every culture. There has never been a culture that did not have a reintegration strategy, a resiliency strategy, a purification strategy, because life is hard. And it's always been hard. It's not like we're just dealing with stress for the first time in human history. They have, our ancestors had exponentially bleaker lives, and yet they've still managed to persevere. The human race is undefeated, and success leaves clues. So when you look at cultures that have lasted a long time, there's a reason why they've done that. And so the reintegration, the purification, the resiliency, all of those components are battle-tested techniques. And in our current culture of comfort and sloth and immediate gratification and addiction and like all of those dynamics, we no longer have to do those things. They're seemingly optional, and they're not. They're mandatory for healthy, happy, high-performing humans. And you can look at that with the skyrocketing rates of clinical anxiety, depression, addiction, suicide, chronic illnesses. Like, we're not doing well. Like, that's the brutal truth, of Western civilization, is that we're simply not doing well by all these really vital markers of mental, physical, emotional health. We're not doing well. So we're losing. And that should piss people off. And it kind of has. And there's a reason why there's a big movement for change happening right now, is that people are angry and they don't want to lose. I don't want to lose this game. I don't want my kids to lose this game. I refuse to have my kids lose this game. We have to look back to see what is our birthright? How did they do it? How do people survive the ice ages? Famine, tremendous legitimate trauma. not just perceived trauma that we're experiencing now of crying rooms and safe spaces and,
mental health boxes.
And trauma should not, therapeutically, you don't compare people's traumas. Combat vets have a certain type of trauma, which is very loud and very clear. And it's like, okay, you saw somebody get blown up. And then you look at a privileged rich kid and they didn't get the car they wanted. Internally, they're experiencing the same thing. It really is the same level of a perceived threat to their physical or emotional well-being. And so they become anxious, they become depressed, they have thoughts of suicide. Like it can be really small, simple things. So we don't compare trauma. So that's one of the things therapeutically, and particularly the symptoms of trauma. But there certainly is just a raw, irrefutable evidence of what we're capable of persevering through. And we're living in this artificial time right now where we don't have the external enforcement vehicle to make us resilient. Like if you're Paleolithic or an earlier culture, and I carefully don't use more primitive culture, they're not any more primitive than we are. In fact, they're much more advanced in a lot of ways. If you don't resolve conflict in your tribe, you die. You have to. If you don't ask for help, you starve. If you don't have some sort of spiritual system that allows you to connect with the world and each other and your purpose, then the world doesn't work. So, the world dictates resiliency, and it dictates cultural success. It dictates a need to have values and affiliation with the tribe. And because we've lost all those drivers, enforcement vehicles for being great and resilient and successful, then they become seemingly optional. And we have basically lost about 2 generations of people with none of those skills. And back to the initiation process, that's another one of those, is human beings are required to go through a formal initiation for them to be a psychologically mature human that can carry the next generation of culture and raise great kids and perpetuate what we are. And so because we've lost that initiation process, you have a lot of mature humans who are psychologically adolescent, and they are focused on what I want now, immediate gratification, external validation. And it's probably the core root of why we are not being successful as a culture currently, is a lack of initiation. That's the big one. And it's not something you can do alone. And so in this giant pride-based world where we're a bunch of individuals, you cannot self-initiate. You need other people as a enforcement arm or accountability system to be able to go through that arduous process. And it still exists. The military is an initiation. Being part of a successful sports team is an initiation. Joining a jiu-jitsu gym is an initiation. So it exists in very narrow veins of our society, which is why those are becoming so popular, particularly with young men. They instinctively know that they have been denied something that is really important. And so, the nature abhors a vacuum. So it's coming out. And there's a reason why ice baths are popular now.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan ice bath,
they're horrible things.
Sauna.
Yeah, it is an artificial adversity. We require adversity. Who would have thought? But, artificial times require artificial means. And so we need to artificially create community now, because it's not going to happen otherwise. We need to artificially create a certain amount of adversity to build resiliency. We need to artificially create institutions to hold us together. And we've lost the church, we've lost government, We've lost all of our big traditional pillars of society have been revealed as being corrupted. And we've recently lost science. That was the dagger for me. Dagger to see how much money is in science. And it is no longer, in many ways, the scientific method is a religion. It's a philosophical school. Here's my hypothesis, and here's how I test it. And, it's clean. It's a philosophical or spiritual system.
It's a truth system.
And to have that one taken away, that was deeply disheartening for me. If they ever decide we didn't go to the moon, I'm going to be mad about that one. I'm going to be mad at that one. Like, no, don't take that from me, man.
Yeah.
When you asked about why offer my sword to corporate work, it's because that's the last pillar. It's the last thing that requires us to come together. It used to be the church, or it used to be I'm an American, or it used to be I believe in science, or any of these other things, which were institutional tent poles that hold up our society. And so the last place is our corporations. So they need to provide meaning. They need to provide affiliation. They need to provide purpose. They need to provide relationships and community. Mm-hmm. Like it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And how, as individuals existing without these structures, how can we try to get initiated, to stop being these mature adolescents or swimming through the world with no direction? Is there any hope for us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's the hero's journey that we were talking about before the camera came on. The hero's journey, which is the big kind of universal map of the sequence of steps that human beings go through. It's why we keep telling the same exact story for 10,000 years. At the nadir, that's the bottom of, it's the dark night of the soul in everyone's quest for meaning, or it might be this fiscal year or training for whatever it is. There's always there's a bleak moment. And Campbell says that's the cave you fear to enter that contains the treasure you seek. The treasure you seek is transformation. It's the crucifixion that leads to the resurrection. It's the phoenixes burning to death so that they can be reborn. And that's the initiation moment. And nobody wants to burn to death, and nobody wants to be crucified, and nobody wants to hit rock bottom. But that's initiation, that moment, because it's the thing that breaks our old worldview of I'm the center of the world and I deserve. Little boys deserve. Men do not. Men earn, and we demand, and we provide. And so that adolescent psychology, which views the world as victims that are being victimized by perpetrators and villains and malevolent forces, whether it's the government or your boss or your dad or whoever it is. And then there's the third role of somebody's going to save me. And we pivot through those different roles of I claim my power and now I'm the villain in the story to somebody else's story. Or I'm going to try to save the world. That is, it's the trauma triangle or the dharma triangle, and that's the adolescent view of the world. The mature view of the world is I'm responsible for it all. Everything within my sphere of influence is mine to own. That's the radical responsibility, ownership, truth that an adult person views everything. If there's something that is not as good as it could be in the world, it's because you're not as good as you could be. That's the bottom line. Take a look at your bank account, your fitness, your sex life, your spiritual practice, like everything in your world. That's on you. Now, the things that are outside of your sphere of control, then you can surrender that. That's faith. All those things that are within your sphere of control, the adult person owns. And that level of responsibility, which is a good word, it's the ability to respond instead of react. Kids react, boys react, adolescent people react, but mature people, they respond. So the ability to respond is responsibility. That's the heaviest burden you can carry, is launching out, into the world, realizing you're responsible for everything. And it's so heavy, at least initially, that people run. I don't want that. It's so much easier to blame the government or your dad or anything else. It's way easier. It's comfortable. It's a rotten blanket. To go through that very initially bleak transition, you need to have accountability. And men initiate men. Women initiate women. It means that when you try to run, when you try to slide, when you try to fall back, when you try to rationalize and make excuses and all that, your old game that you ran your whole life, then you have brothers that go like, no, don't buy it. And
they call you out.
Most men I know don't have any of those men. Unless you have fostered those relationships, and they're honor-based, which means you've done the same for them. If you remove alcohol, sports, your job, men have no friends. And everybody listening, remove alcohol, sports, and your job. Who you got left that you can call and say, I know you have a truck. Can you help me move? How many men would help you move? And most of the men listening to this have zero. So that's why we're not initiating anymore. Yeah. Is that the system's broken. That's a big portion of my work is instilling the infrastructure to make that possible again.
Yeah. And realizing you have no real friends is a rude awakening. Yeah. A very rude awakening.
And it should be terrifying.
Yeah.
It should be absolutely anxiety producing. And yet we have so much distraction that it's easy to just mask that with some doom scrolling, with whatever your distraction junk is. It's so you don't have to face that bleak reality. Is that, I'm a lone wolf and I'm going to starve to death eventually.
Maybe for a lot of people listening, or young people in general, that awakening is the call to adventure, the call to transform, to go on your own hero's journey. What was that hero's journey like for you?
Back that up. That call to adventure, which is there's something wrong in the world, there's something wrong in your life, there's some, that's the moment when Luke is asked if he wants to go be a Jedi. This unfulfilling little farm gig you got is not your destiny. That's the cubicle life, right? Rocky being a thug in Philly, breaking kneecaps. Harry Potter under the stairs. Neo in his cubicle, being a hacker. Dorothy in Kansas. That's the call to adventure moment. And they all refuse. And so do you. It's a form of absolution that all of these stories, the hero refuses the call. That's why it exists. That's why when we tell a great story, the hero isn't winning, because we're not winning. Everybody goes through big portions of life. And even if you are currently winning and you took a very sober look at your life, there's aspects of your life that you're not winning. Whether it's your faith, your fitness, your sex life, your money, like there's something that you've been like, when I get to it. Or, Luke's reason is, I've got work Monday. I can't go do this crazy spiritual journey. And that's the answer. People aren't undertaking this radical life lift because they're busy, they're burned out, they're tired. Or Rocky's excuse of why he doesn't choose to fight Apollo Creed. I'm just a bum. Yeah, who am I? Who am I to undertake this epic adventure? So it is a form of absolution for all of us that, you're not as good as you could be, and that's universal. You are forgiven. But don't wait too long, because the old Greek proverb, fate guides those who will, and those who won't, she drags. So the longer you wait, the harder she drags. And at some point, she's going to win. Fate wins. She bats last. And she's coming with 2x4s to help you build a life. And if you don't start building, then she's going to hit you with it. She's going to break you with it. And that's the moment when Luke's family dies. It's like, oh, is that your sticking point? Let me just handle this for you. Oh, you're not addressing your health because you don't have time? Well, let's make some time because you're going to deal with cancer. Oh, okay. So we're always going to wish that we'd gotten to it earlier. And that portion of the hero's journey is just saying, we've all done it. Every hero in the history of our species has refused the call until they were forced. And then they're off and running at that point because they're forced. And eventually, they're going to gather the skills through adversity of needing people. You need to find your allies. You need to find some sort of faith system that's bigger than you that you can surrender control to. You need to be able to find the missing pieces that you don't have. That's the elder wisdom piece.
Yeah.
And once you've gathered those 3 heroic gifts, then you can take a shot at initiation. Once you have your allies, elder wisdom, supernatural aid, then you've got all the tools you need to get through that cave. And that's the dragon, right? That's the big scary beast. That dragon in the cave has our face on it. It's always us.
Yeah.
Always us in the cave.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to look at that. But once you have your allies and you have faith and you have knowledge of things that you didn't have before, then you can address that issue. And then that's the resurrection. That's the initiation. And then the rest of the back end of the hero's journey is a much more, it's equally arduous and daunting and demanding and challenging, but it's way more fun. And unfortunately, most men are not getting access to that, and I've been kind of teaching and exploring the hero's journey for, 30 years. And I had a very solid grasp of all those stages up to initiation. And then the back half was like, oh, Joseph Campbell says this and this and this, and it was sort of really fast and bleak. Yeah. And because the reality was I hadn't gone down that path. I hadn't lived it. I'd never been in the garden. I'd never returned with treasure. I hadn't done these things in a significant way. So, the last decade has been a big illumination of what the back half of the hero's journey is. And it's awesome. And it's one of those things I really encourage, get through the initiation process, do the things you need to do to be the captain of your fate. Because that's where all the good stuff is. All the greatness, all the fun, all the meaning, and is that.
Yeah, we can't get there without the initiation.
Yeah, that's the moment. Back to the initiation, or the rite of passage, is to be able to die and be reborn. Have you ever read? There's a great samurai book, the Hagakure.
Oh, Hagakure. I've read parts of it. Yeah.
The Hagakure, he was a samurai guy in the 16th century, and they just passed a law in feudal Japan that the samurai who lost their master are no longer allowed to kill themselves. Deeply disheartening. It was like losing an election for that poor dude. He's like, my whole life has just gone to shit. Now I have to be ashamed and, to wallow through the rest of myself. The only thing he figured out how to do is I'm going to spend the rest of my bleak existence just cataloging all this stories of the samurai culture. So it's a wild book. It's called the Hagakure. There's a really funny part where he says, it's almost impossible to find a man who could do a proper beheading anymore these days. we're always complaining about, the current generation of kids these days.
Yeah, they can't get a job, won't take responsibility.
But the theme,
proper beheading.
The theme that runs through that book is the samurai it appears to be morbidly obsessed with death. They're always talking about dying. And the best way to die and why you should die. And always you wake up and meditate on your death and death. But what he's really talking about is the internal death. The samurai are ferocious predators of inner frailty, weakness, character flaws, lack of discipline. And that's what they're killing. That's why they're so obsessed with death, is that's what they're doing, is that they are, it's a culture built on, they're the first human optimization dudes. They were living the Joe Rogan life before that. They're obsessed with it. And that's part of that initiation process, is that, yeah, there's parts of us that have to die for another part to be born. It's the deciding. The word decide has the same root as the words homicide or suicide, and it means to cut or kill in Latin. So every intentional deciding we make is the death of other things. So when you decide to get in shape, it's not free. You're killing off comfort, what you would choose to eat, what the people you hang out with, what you do on Friday nights. Like, you're killing off a bunch of things to do that one thing. Even that is an example of an initiation. Like, you want to get in shape? Okay, well, here's the things that have to die. And you're not going to be able to do that alone. You need the accountability of people that when you have your moment of weakness and it's Friday night and you're like, F it, I'm eating, drinking, doing whatever you do, that you have guys come in and go like, I'm guarding the exits. You don't get to run like that. You're getting in shape. So initiation occurs constantly in the self-development or leadership process. Like, that's our job. For all the leaders, whether it's a family or a work team or our country, that's your job, is to undertake that heroic journey of getting your shit together. It's mandatory.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious about your experience with coming into that call to adventure. I'll share my experience with it. When I was in high school, I had a moment where I was very prideful. I was full of myself with my intelligence. I thought I was very smart. I thought that was the most important thing ever. And I examined my life and I was like, I don't really have any friends. I don't have like the body that I want. I don't have like a happy life. My mental health sucks. All of these things suck, right? And I'm like, oh, but I'm smart. That's all that matters. And once I took that away, I was like, I have nothing. And so I realized that, and I asked myself the question, if you're so damn smart, why can't you figure out how to be happy? And that question just broke my current state of being, and I had to change. I had to change immediately. And so that developed a process where
it was hubris.
Yeah, I had hubris, and I couldn't change because of the hubris until that hubris was broken. Mm-hmm. And that developed the process of me actually getting in shape, trying to build the physique that I wanted. I started learning how to make friends. I was like, okay, I'm going to connect with people. I'm going to learn how to do that. Reading books, doing the self-improvement stuff, right? And yeah, that I think that moment was so pivotal, and just acknowledging that call to adventure and getting pushed down by fate just steamrolled everything else forward. And there was no other option.
Yeah, it's a, what's the quote? The awakening process is irreversible. It really, it is irreversible. Once you see it, like, to go back is fraudulent. You're a charlatan. You're a coward.
Yeah.
Like, So, yeah, the awakening process is irreversible. Who said that? Jamie, look it up.
Too bad we don't have a Jamie.
Who said that quote? I'm going to claim it if you can't find anybody. No, it's probably Hume or someone else.
I don't know. Churchillian drift. You know that one?
Winston Churchill?
Yeah. Quotes that don't have an attribution tend to drift towards being attributed to Churchill.
The other day I was trying to guess where a quote came from, and I was thinking, is that Shakespeare? And we were both like, it's probably Churchill.
Yeah.
Churchill.
It was Churchill. He's done a lot of cool things.
We looked it up. It was some obscure British lord.
Oh.
But it could have been Churchill.
Yeah. But I guess my follow-up to that was, what was your experience like in that awakening, getting yourself up off your couch, being a non-mature or an adolescent, right, before your initiation?
Firstly, congratulations for getting that early. Most young men are not self-aware enough that they can be the witness of themselves. There's a vague understanding of, I don't have the things that I want, but there isn't the connection of, I'm responsible and I can. Like that's a developmental process that you get from older men who are modeling that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a mentor or a coach or an active, engaged dad or, some other cool uncles or, who are supposed to provide you with that roadmap, you're pretty lost. You're going to be in a multi-decade slog until fate breaks you. And then you'll start figuring it out, Well, I see a lot of young men getting it earlier. And I think a lot of it because it's being modeled for you. Like the reason why you're doing this podcast is that you've seen other podcasts that provided value for you. Like, oh, there's a path. And this is an era of the rebirth of great men. I'm clear about it. There's no gloom and doom about society or masculinity collapsing. This is the rebirth of great men. And there has always been eras of great men, and they come right at the period of time where there's enough, call it comfort or resources or freedom to explore deeper thoughts. Because if you're worried about defending your country or feeding your family, you are not exploring philosophy. So you need to have enough freedom in there that you have the opportunity to explore deeper things.
Yeah. No, I love what you're saying right there. With philosophy, that was probably a huge driver in me having that awakening. Was I had a philosophy professor who was stand-up guy, very masculine, loved working out, wrestled, did philosophy.
Yeah.
And this was like, I was like, yo, I want to be like him. I want to be like this guy. So just seeing a role model, a mentor to model after was something that was so useful. And the philosophy portion of thinking through things, of being able to consider deeper ideas as opposed to, I'm just trying to survive.
100%. All the great Greek philosophers, they landed in a certain perfect era, or our founding fathers. Like those men could speak multiple languages. They architects of their own house. They ran, they did a bunch of things, and they could duel, and they could fight, and they could do agriculture, and they could do business, and they could do philosophy. These were multifaceted men that did great things. Were at that time where, I look at, Jocko or Rogan or a whole number of men, and they're doing things at a professional level across multiple spheres, which is not perceived as being something that you should be able to do. Like, no, pick your lane and you stay in it. They're doing multiple things at a very high level. So it's a very exciting time, and you get to witness that and go, oh, that's available to me? So I can be financially successful and spiritually robust and have a great relationship and do all the things. Looking at her.
Yeah.
And that's possible. And that, for me, that guy was a drill sergeant in the Army, and I was 18 and, just a total basket case. And we were doing stupid, just adolescent things in basic training. And so we were getting punished, getting just our asses smoked in grass drills at 3 a.m. Hosed. I mean, it was horrible. And I remember him saying, his name was Drill Sergeant Thomas. I remember, this is I don't know, 40 years ago. I remember Drill Sergeant Thomas, handsome black guy, the hat, he could sing beautiful cadence. He was jacked. He was like, oh my God, look like that dude. Wow. In the middle of this abyss, he said, if, first of all, a million or more, young men have gone through what you're going through, and they have persevered. You have everything that they have and more. You absolutely are able to do it. I was like, oh, nobody ever told me that. It was, there's the rich people. There's the successful people. There's the jacked people. They're different than me somehow. I'm cursed. I have this that's me. I was born like that. Or whatever. That's not the reality. And the reality is everybody watching this has all the tools you need to be as great as any other human out there that's doing it.
Yeah.
You have all the raw ingredients. And then he said, he pointed at a big street light above us. He goes, if I see another man climb that pole, jump off, not get hurt, he goes, I can do that. And I was like, oh, like it resonated with me. It sounds crude and adolescent, but for me, that was one of those seminal moments that I continually refer back to, of when I look at a man I admire and would be intimidated by, or maybe covetous, or what, like, why am I not doing that? Why am I not capable? What are they doing that's different? What do I need to learn? What is my initiation into that level of excellence, arete? Right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people attribute a lack of achievement to I just don't have what's available, what I need to get there, right? I need to go study about this thing for 3 years so I can finally do it. And it's like, no, you have the tools, and you most likely have enough knowledge to get started.
Yeah.
Like, at least with like fitness, with the gym, a lot of people will sit there and watch the most optimal training program and these are the exercises you have to do. And it's like, I have to study this stuff to be optimal, to get jacked. Yeah. It's like, you could do the basics for the rest of your life, like 5 exercises.
Yeah.
And you will get jacked.
Start.
Yeah. And that's the hard part, right? Is the starting.
Yeah. That's refusing the call. I'm refusing the call because everyone in my family's fat, or nobody has money, or it's the victim story. Somehow I am a victim and other people are villains, and I'm waiting for somebody to save me. And it's, we go through all of these struggles until we realize, no, it's you. Oh, that is the liberating moment. The burden of that is, and Peterson does a genius job of unpacking Exodus. That's his we who wrestle with God kind of thing, And so when the Jews are liberated from the tyranny and slavery of Pharaoh, then they get to go to the promised land. It's like, awesome. No, you got desert time. And that is a portion of the hero's journey, is that post-initiation, you don't get all the good stuff. Yeah. You're not jacked. You're not rich. You're not those things. You have to go through the desert, which then is the thing that integrates the initiation. The desert is a trackless place that is designed to test the faithful. That's why it exists. And in the Exodus analogy, they get lost and they get disgruntled and disenfranchised and disappointed, and they start worshiping false idols, and their journey's done. Until you have your pillar of smoke, pillar of fire, and your commandments. That's the metaphor. And that's your vision and your values. That's the foundation of culture, is your vision and your values, which is why when I'm doing organizational development, that's where we start. I start with the executive team. You need to have a very, very clear vision for why this organization exists, and you need to have a set of values that guide the decision-making process of your people. That's your pillar of smoke commandments. And if you don't have that, your people will eventually quit and they will either leave to find another tribe that has a vision and values, or they will become disengaged and become that 87%
Yeah.
who is going to just park it wherever they are and start worshiping false idols.
Yeah.
And you'll see them doom scrolling.
Computer is gonna die.
Do you need to plug it in?
Take 5.
Yeah, man, let's charge it up. Okay, we're live?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay.
All right. So
So shout out Jack Donovan for this shirt. We're talking about power brands. Or maybe I'm this camera. Power brands.
all right. Well, we talked a lot about initiation. We talked about
That was a while ago.
it was
Okay.
a little bit ago. We talked about the mission, the shared values,
Yep.
all of this alignment,
Yep.
the things that deal with alignment. And in order to have initiation, to have this process occur, you need kinship. You need people around you, right?
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about kinship. What does that mean?
Kinship is the same root as the word kind. So we can't have kindness without kinship. And kindness is the specific behavior that we reserve for our kin. And we can't be kind to everyone on the planet, otherwise we will run out of resources. At some point, we have to recognize that there is a core group of people that deserve our sacrifice.
Yeah.
And if we're sacrificing for everyone in the world and it's not reciprocal, then eventually we go extinct. And so we can be respectful and we can be nice and we can, do all these great things for the world. But in terms of the kindness that involves sacrifice, that needs to be reciprocal. So earlier we talked about how many men will actually help you move. Well, it's not free. They're giving up a day of their life, which they would have rather be doing something else, and they're willing to do that for you. That's kindness. That's kinship. And when another man does that for you, you owe them. That's how the reciprocity works. It means that they have one in the bank with you. That's honor. Honor is a relationship-based behavior. And so a kinship system is an honor-based culture. And that's the biggest thing that's been lost in our current society of pride, is that there is no reciprocity, there is no honor. And so kinship is that foundation of sacrifice to other people within your community that will be reciprocal. And that engine creates so much trust and safety and resiliency that it enables us to engage with things that are risky.
Yeah. And so in regards to this idea of kinship creates altruism, it creates sacrifice, it creates helping other people, and we've lost it in a modern era. How can we go about building kinship, recreating these systems where the community surrounds you, you take risks, they pick you back up? How do we create that?
Well, one of two ways. The first one is you join an existing honor-based culture. And the popularity of jiu-jitsu is that you can't join a gym that is teaching and participating in a lethal technology without honor. I mean, it's a deal breaker. There are very strict codes of what you do and don't do in a jiu-jitsu gym. Otherwise, you are removed from you're excommunicated because it's lethal, it's deadly. Yeah. And that is an anchor back to how we used to live, which is the world is deadly. There are competing territorial tribes. There are animals that eat us. There is starvation. There is predation. There is environment. It's lethal. We're perfectly adapted for a lethal environment. And our protocol for dealing with that is kinship. It's a mandatory operating system for people who deal with lethal things. That's why the military is honor-based. Police, fire, sports, jiu-jitsu, those are honor-based cultures because they're lethal. So join one of those, and then you will get to reap the benefits as long as you're willing to conduct yourself in an honorable way. Then you get all the benefits of that. The other avenue of kinship is you create it. And that's the responsibility of leaders. And you create it by that foundation of we have a shared aspirational vision for the future, which is significant enough that it requires our full commitment. But we also have a set of values, behaviors, a code, a creed, your articles of agreement on a pirate ship that you sign that says we will abide by these rules, and that behavior will drive us towards our future. That is the foundation of your kinship system. And it comes from leaders. Leaders have to model this. We don't decree it. We recognize that our people and our kids are not listening to us. They're watching us. So that's part of the evidence of our efficacy is our life. Mm-hmm. We have to be living whatever the operating system is that we're promoting. The people who are falsely adopting that get revealed very quickly.
Yeah. And when we're creating these systems of kinship, there are people who might try to take advantage of these systems, right? There's people are giving, people are sacrificing, people are being heroes, and some bad players come in. Mm-hmm. How do we deal with those people?
Generally speaking, culture is a critical mass. There's a tipping point. And particularly when you're looking at the people who are engaged in culture creation, organizational development, and they're getting up to speed with culture change, that as soon as you get past 50%, then the rest of the people will fall into line because they realize that that's how I reclaim belonging. And belonging is the biggest driver of humanity. We need belonging. As soon as you have that 50% buy-in of leadership, then the rest will fall into line. The ones that do not abide will self-select out. You don't have to fire people. You just have to keep running your game. And very quickly, people will be like, ooh, this is not my culture. Whether that's because they're not willing to or they're not able to. And there are many different versions of culture with a different vision for the future and a different set of values. And people need to find one that makes sense for them. And that's legitimate. That 50% marker is one that solidifies culture change. And the people who, once that's intact, people who come in that are not aligned with that will very quickly realize it. That, oh, I'm going to be revealed as not in alignment. And they will self-select.
Yeah. Through, well, be it shame from the group or be it other people talking about them that they're taking advantage of the system.
Oh, yeah. Shame is a really powerful emotion because it's the way that communities police behavior. So it's a deadly sharp sword. And when people use the shame sword indiscriminately, then just massive amounts of trauma in the world. Shame, 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 shame. Where it really should be, the stick of fate, where it's like, if you don't, and here's why, then you don't get to participate in all the things we're doing. When people are experiencing shame, it triggers the same part of your brain, your amygdala, as a literal threat to your life.
Yeah.
It's a death response.
Yeah.
Shame is a death response. And horses do it. Wolves do it. Almost every communal species has a shame function where if you're not abiding by our norms, then we run you out and you die. That's how the game works in the real world. And so obviously, a horse that gets run out into the plains, they get eaten that night. The safety's in the herd. Yeah. Now, the dark part is when you see that happen in school, and when the culture is maladaptive and you're having people getting shamed for not being part of a toxic culture. Like, oh, that's really dark. People who don't participate in the alignment foundation and then they're being held accountable, they interpret it as shame. Whereas if you are part of the team and you're receiving coaching, critical feedback, improvements, if you're part of that, you don't interpret it as shame. You interpret it as coaching or investment or accountability. That's an incredibly important nuance from leadership, is you want to solidify alignment and belonging, and then give critical feedback. That way it's not shameful. It's called accountability, which is what every high-performing team in the world recognizes as a central part of their success. Can you have critical feedback and have people hold themselves and each other accountable for success?
Yeah. And so shame acts as this mechanism within large groups to change behaviors of people who might take advantage of the system.
Correct. And then, shame is just the dark word. The brighter version is accountability. And again, people who want to take advantage of the system and they're held accountable, they're going to interpret it as shame, but that's because they don't belong.
Yeah. And from what you're saying, it reminds me of modern politics in a sense, in that if you're be on the left, be on the right, there seems to be a weaponizing of shame on both sides, where it's like, you don't agree on this issue with me, we're going to kick you out of the group, or you better align with us right now. And it's happening on both sides at a very massive scale. Even with this recent election, I keep seeing posts online that are very shaming towards whatever group they don't like.
Yeah. Alignment first. That's the biggest leadership axiom that I would leave with everybody is, if there's something going wrong culturally within your team, look at the level below. And those 4 levels are alignment, kinship, healthy conflict, sustainable success. So if there's something that is missing, then look at that foundational step before it and do that work.
Yeah. And so you have the alignment, the kinship, both of these things create conflict.
They enable you to have the tools and the solidity and the foundation to deal with conflict. Conflict is inevitable.
Okay. Say more about that.
Life is conflict in a certain way. You can't innovate without failure. That's conflict. You can't hold somebody accountable without having some potential blowback of hurt feelings, resentment, miscommunication. That's conflict. You can't make a critical decision without acknowledging that I'm going to make bad ones, and there's conflict. Competitiveness inherently involves conflict. You can't be competitive and not recognize that, somebody's going to lose. That's part of the game. So the ability to have the resiliency to be able to engage with conflict in a functional sense, it comes straight from kinship. Otherwise, you're going to have people either avoid it, they will not innovate, they will not make decisions, they will not be intrinsically motivated, they will not hold each other accountable, they will just acquiesce. They will fight, flight, freeze, appease. One of those 4 dysfunctional trauma responses. So if you want your team to actually engage in a competitive, successful, innovative manner, you have to have that foundation of trust and safety.
Yeah. And in the culture of comfort that we're talking about, I think a lot of young people are afraid of conflict,
100%.
afraid of pissing someone off, doing the wrong thing. So a lot of people will avoid speaking out on values or speaking out on this stuff that you're talking about, alignment. So how, as young people, can we have the right tools to handle conflicts in this modern lens?
First of all, that honor culture or tribal systems only works at 150 people or less. That's the Dunbar's number. When you get bigger than that, then we lose the intimacy of our connections. The situation you're talking about with small groups of young people who are struggling with that, run the same protocol. Hey, alignment, and even if your alignment is different than somebody else, you can still honor what their vision for the future is. You can honor their values. You don't have to dismiss that. There still can be a consensus of, okay, we're different, and those differences is actually what makes us great. Our differences drive our adaptability. That differences are great, but we still have to have some foundation of a respectful acknowledgement of different people's things. And once you have that, then you can explore that kinship level and so on and so forth. In big organizations that are above 150, you have to now start relying on some external structures. And this is when we have organized religion, and we have organized government, and we have Those are those pillars of society that hold us together in groups that are larger than 150, right? So when we see those being corrupted and not revitalized, that's society threatening. It really is. America is a great example of that. It was a revolutionary idea in human history that we're going to hold together all these different states with completely different cultures and economies and worldviews, and we're going to create this alignment system that holds us all together. I mean, it's radical, deeply radical. Our Constitution is a radical document. So that is what holds America together. Is our articles, our amendments, the Constitution. We have this foundation of alignment that is the only thing that holds us together. That thing. So if we lose that, then you see the raw dysfunctional tribalism that we're experiencing today. Tribalism is the dark side of tribe. It's you can't have tribe without the other. There's always the other, because that's what welds us together as an affiliation, an identity.
It's to beat the other guy.
Group. And that comes with it. You're not going to be competitive until you realize there's another. And so how do you make that healthy? And USC and UCLA, there's a rivalry. But they're both Los Angeles teams. They're both football teams that play by the same rules. So there's built-in alignment. And when we lose that alignment piece, then you have a much darker, more volatile thing. And politically, we're sliding towards that.
Yeah. And I guess for tribes on a global scale, that would look like acknowledging the humanity, having empathy for other groups, regardless of, they're on the other team, I want to beat them, but I can acknowledge that they have the same humanity as me, and on that level we're aligned.
In World War I, they paused the war for Christmas. All these dudes who are gassing and machine gunning each other come out of the trenches, give whatever gifts they had, hugged it out on Christmas. That is alignment. There's something that we can share, that we can have this moment. Yeah,
we all want to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah. And that is the solution to our political tribalism, is that fly the flag. That's the flag. That's a symbol. Symbols are a deep form of affiliation that we all carry. And until we have a global flag and there's aliens that we have to fight or negotiate with or whatever it is, then what we have is nationalism.
And even that symbol has been somewhat degraded, right? Like, someone flying the American flag is immediately pitted as being a Republican.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so that symbol that used to represent our unity now represents our division.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I'm, let's say, a young person listening to this, and I do want to have alignment between my friends, my family, my community, it seems weird to have these conversations, right? Maybe a little bit awkward, a little bit just you want to talk about values. In a team, it might make sense, but within your community, it feels a little bit weird. How can we tackle those things tactically?
Yeah, you have to talk about them. I did this with my family. I do this with big organizations. Right? I grind them on their vision statement, and we wordsmith it, and we make it memorable. And same thing with values. Try to find an acronym, whatever we can do to make that vision and values applicable. And I hadn't really done it formally with my family, and so we got together, and I asked my wife, okay, what's our family vision? What's our big why? And she immediately came out with, I think our big vision is to live life so well that it serves as an example of what is possible. It's like, damn, honey, it was done. That's our family creed.
I love it.
I'll put that in Latin under my coat of arms. Live life so well it serves as an example of what is possible. And again, I do this professionally, and I didn't do it. So that conversation That's the best dinner conversation you can have. Go out and get beers with your friends and have that conversation. Like, what's your creed? What's your ethos? Why are you here? Ooh, like that's the pro level conversation. And then the ancillary piece, which is around the values, that's work. That's some work you have to do. I have a big war board in my office, and I write down kind of principles or quotes that I hear that are navigating statements, commandments. I have a commandment list, and I hunt those actively. I don't know, whatever my algorithm is, but it feeds me a lot of inspirational shit.
Mine too.
It's like, okay. And every once in a while, I hear something that, Hormuzzi, and he shared this one that the solution to something is the work you're avoiding.
Oh,
Whatever.
yeah. The magic you are looking for is in the work you are avoiding.
Oh, so good. And both those dudes were like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, yes. So we're getting inundated with that. And so the more structured part is to actually start crystallizing a worldview of what is this about?
Yeah.
And so I think I have 12 of those statements on my board, which are kind of like the way that I refer to it. It's right next to my desk. I look at it. I'm like, okay. And so for young people, at some point when you're going pro with your life, you have come up with that thing. And it's your elevator's, speech. And a networking event, on a first date, you lead with that. This is who I am. You should lead with that. Job interview, lead with that. Every meeting you go to, if you're a leader, you lead with that. This is why we're here. These are our values. You work it in because it's super powerful.
Yeah. What do you mean by going pro on your life?
Going pro.
Yeah.
That's a Pressfield. We were talking about Stephen Pressfield. He's a big historical fiction author, and he wrote a book called The War of Art, which outlined his creative process. And one piece in that book that a lot of people gravitated to is the difference between an amateur and a pro.
And what's the difference?
People think that amateurs have a certain casual nature of their life, and pros have a level of success and money. That's a pro.
Yeah.
When you get paid, you're a pro. And he's saying that's not it at all. To be a pro is to take your life seriously. So if you want to get in shape, you need to address it professionally. If you want to write a book, if you want to have a great relationship, if you want to be a great parent, you look at it professionally, which means an endless commitment to growth, that you prioritize it, you're willing to sacrifice for it. That's the difference between an amateur and a pro. And it's not, that you have a God-given gift and you get paid a lot of money to throw a football. It's that's what you do. It's your identity. And it really comes down to an identity. If you identify yourself as somebody who you're a healthy, fit person and you live your life according to that identity, you're a pro. So that's how he writes his books. He sits down at 9 o'clock in the morning and he opens the document and he waits for the muse. And sometimes it's bumpy and terrible and unreadable. Stephen King calls that his the closed door version, where you just allow yourself to write crap.
No one's going to see
for days, just unreadable junk. But that's going pro.
Yeah.
Is you're doing it. A professional goes to the gym when they don't want to. And they don't crush, they're not impeccable, they're not flawless, they're not skilled. They just show up. Show up. That's what pros do.
Okay, do you think we can take life too seriously and go in the other direction? Like in my head, I'm imagining a person who has so many goals they want to accomplish and responsibilities, and they just don't have fun.
You can only go pro in a few things.
Yeah.
And you pick those with great intentionality.
With your values, with your alignment.
You can go pro in anything. There are people who build their entire life around travel. Not my version of pro. But for them, they're pros and they have seen the world and they have, it's what they do. It's great. There are professional parents. There's professional, Like if you look at my house and how my wife builds this house, she's a pro. It's her identity. It's what she does. You can go pro in anything, but all the things that are important for you, you need to go pro.
Talk to me about the last step of the pyramid, sustainable success.
It's legacy. That tribe triangle that we're of those 4 levels of culture creation are very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to start at the bottom, or otherwise you don't get the ones above. Maslow ends with self-actualization, and that's pride-based. That's individualistic. It's me focused on myself. And sustainable success is the recognition that there is another level above self-actualization. In every indigenous culture, there is the responsibility for the creation of the next generation that is following you. It is honoring of the ancestors and the ancestors to come, and that you're a part of that. It's the perpetuation of culture. It's adaptability. It's long-term. It's the persistence hunt, that every significant thing that humans or wolves have ever done is a persistence hunt. That means that it involves consistency and investment and recommitment and reconnection over time. And sustainable success is where all the big meaning is. It's fulfillment, legacy.
And when you talk about legacy, what are the things you're looking at in legacy? What impact are you looking for?
That's going to vary person to person, organization to organization. But whatever it is, it's the acknowledgement that what you're doing is standing on the shoulders of your ancestors and appreciating and acknowledging that, and then realizing that you're that person for the next generation or generations to come, that you're part of something that is deeper and more significant than any individual could ever be. That's legacy.
What's your legacy?
My legacy is reintroducing kinship back into the world and reclaiming that as our birthright.
And I guess I want to get behind the why of why that legacy. Why you listed your 5 whys in the book. I guess I want to go through the 5 whys with you. Why?
Why I've landed at kinship is that it's the solution to our 2 big problems. Those are the cratering mental, emotional health, our resiliency, our physical health. Like we're losing that game. And then the other component is abundance, success, legacy, service, meaning, like all those action-oriented things. One's defense, one's offense. The solution to both of those is the kinship system. It solves both of those issues, and it's catastrophically missing. That is the place that I've landed in terms of the master lever of humanity, is that piece.
And what's the why behind solving those problems? Why do you want to pull the master lever for humanity?
Because it solves those 2 problems. It solves the 2 big issues facing humanity. It creates freedom and meaning for humanity, is our kinship systems.
Yeah. And what do you find important about humanity?
Oh boy, I think we're going to launch into another rabbit hole down here, but humanity is consciousness, it's divinity, it's the universe waking up to itself. That's humanity. So we occupy a unique and rare position in life, that we are both animal and base and all of those tribal things, but we are also divine. We have the ability to create. We have the ability for self-awareness, and humanity is, God in the world. We are that. We're either one of those 2 things, and so I'm a big fan. I'm a fan of humanity. I believe that it's divinity expressed.
No, I think even that is a unique take, because I find a lot of people are anti-humanity these days. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, seeing that humanity is important in some way, and for you it's divinity. That reminds me of this practice that I've been participating in called circling. and it's an authentic relating practice, which one of my mentors introduced me to. And in it, one person is centered in the middle of a circle. There might be 5 people, and there's one moderator. And this person acts as a sounding board of the human experience for everyone else in the room. So the way of operating in a circle is that everyone is trying to understand this person's authentic experience through questioning, through sharing emotion, and through sharing what they perceive of this person's experience. And in my experience with circling, every time the circle would go deeper, everyone would just have like this sigh of understanding and feeling just the same as the other person. Like, oh, it all makes sense. You are me, I am you.
Yeah.
And that's that divinity, that God, whatever you want to call it, between all of us.
It's a universal experience.
Yeah.
It's a universal quest, freedom and meaning. In that heroic journey, those are the grails, freedom and meaning for everyone.
Yeah.
And so that commonality is divine. There's something that is, quite special about human beings.
Humans are cool.
Human beings are hella cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we talk about your book, we talk about these things you've learned, these things you teach, I want to know about how your experience in the Army influenced these teachings. Like, what did you experience there that changed your outlook on life?
The first one that I talked about with the drill sergeant is the ownership and responsibility that we have available. Profound. I also had some experiences not having money at a bar, and a stranger who happened to be wearing a uniform gave me money. No way of recouping that money. Never had met me before. Oh, here's a brother who doesn't have $5 for a beer. Hey, yeah. And that was a very foreign concept to me. When you talk about we are together, and it's because of the uniform. That was affiliation, or your circle is that, oh, there's a we here, and it's profound. It's a profound thing. And I never had any we growing up. So that was remarkable. It was big enough that it overrode everything else. There is no race, doesn't exist in the military. It does in the sense that, oh, there's the black guys, and they have their own unique culture, and it's interesting. And there's the Hispanic dudes, and there's the rednecks, and they have their own little cliques and language. But the moment the uniform goes on, ooh, you're green. Everyone's green. That was profound. That there is something bigger than all these other divisive issues around, religion or race or any other type of specialization, that when you put alignment on top of that, that's the trump card.
Yeah.
That's kinship. And to experience a culture of kinship is a profound experience. If you get stuck behind enemy lines, you get injured. They will not stop. They will not stop to get you out until they get you out. There's a code in our military that you leave no one behind. And it's built in, and that's the kinship system. Is that we can't afford to, because if you have one moment where, oh, those people are wounded, let them go, it erodes the whole structure. Yeah. Like, oh, maybe I can't afford to take those risks because they'll leave me behind. So they enforce that with ferocious regularity. And even if you have one knucklehead, it's your responsibility to take care of the knucklehead who always forgets to fill his canteen. You better fill his canteen. That's part of the game. And one of the ethos of the military is that you watch out for the guys, in your unit. And you almost don't have to watch out for yourself because you've got 9 other guys watching out for you. Like that was a profound paradigm shift for me, who didn't have any of that growing up. So that code, that brotherhood, that alignment is a really important dynamic. that gave me a glimpse into the power of a kinship system or an honor culture. And, I'm not promoting the military as something that everybody should do or could do. We have 73% of our young men unfit for duty. 73%.
That's
Chronic disease, obesity, 73% of our country.
Yeah.
The young men are not fit to serve. Woo! Like, that's not just lifestyle. That's
it's an epidemic.
yeah, that is a threat to our very existence. We've gone that far down the road. So.
And it's not even just in unfitness. Like, I think young men are falling behind on all metrics,
Yep.
right? Like, they're falling behind in education.
Yep.
They're falling behind on jobs. They're falling behind on mental health. Like, men are 4% more likely to die by suicide. 73% of men are 73% of opioid deaths are from men.
Yep.
So
Homelessness,
yep.
suicide, incarceration, it's catastrophic.
Yeah. And it seems like we're failing young men, right?
Yep.
And
Up until now.
yeah,
Until now.
up until now, it's the call to adventure.
Yeah.
And I think the point that I wanted to get to there was that there's a lot of young men looking for meaning, and then there's this dynamic of like parasocial relationships with online influencers. And I don't know if you have seen this at all, but you have even like Jordan Peterson. Some people see him as a guru. I'll do everything he says, or like Joe Rogan, or you have Andrew Tate. You have these figures that pop up feeding a story, and young men without a story grab onto the story.
100%. Yeah. That's tribalism. It's the same dynamic with gangs. You will join any gang that will have you because you're going to die alone. Like the lone wolf dynamic, even if people look at the romantic mythology of the lone wolf, the independent man, Rambo, the Lone Ranger, you know it intuitively that it's a death sentence. So you will find whatever clique that will take you. And then there are probably some bad operators in that space on both sides. So the part of that is we need to stop villainizing men as just a scapegoat for the issues of the world.
Yeah.
And it's contentious to say, but kind of my response to that, being a man in the world, is that we have certainly perpetuated the majority of the ills in the world. If you look at environmental catastrophes and the wars and the all of the blights on our record, it's men. However, we also built the world. So you need to speak to both of those dynamics. Thank you. And do better. Great. I don't know a man in the world that would not acknowledge that. Like, okay, I got acknowledgement for who I am and what I did in the world, and the fact that you have running water and nobody's eating you and nobody's freezing to death, and you have more food than we have obesity issues, not starvation issues. Thank you, men. Good job. And now get your shit together. Like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's that being seen portion.
Yeah.
And being included in the kinship, right?
Yeah.
It's like in the way that we're failing them is that we're putting them away from the kinship. We're using shame as an attack on, oh, men suck. Oh, men did this.
And I would say the same thing about institutions. The Boy Scouts did some terrible things. The church did some terrible things. Government did some terrible things. Okay, fix it. You don't remove it. You don't just yank it out like it's a dead thing. The analogy of that is when you look at fossils, or skeletons, when you see a broken leg, that's what killed the animal. Unless they have people around to heal them. And that means that they're worth investing in. They're worth the sacrifice that it takes to have that broken-legged man, who did bad things or made mistakes, particularly when they're in their adolescent phase. which is me, instant gratification, external validation. Like, you made a lot of mistakes, but unless we can invest in them to heal them, then we're suffering because they are us. They are part of us now, and they're part of our legacy for the future. And I would say the same thing about incarceration. You know, it's that we have, I don't know, 10,000 prisons or something in there.
Yeah, something crazy.
We're leading the free world in our incarceration numbers, and we have written them off. And it's not a successful strategy. Bringing these valuable people who have been to the darkness, and then the people who have been through the abyss and come out the other side, those are the greatest people we have. They really are.
They've done the hero's journey.
They have done it. And the same thing with combat vets and addicts, and like, they're the people who we revere because they've come through the other side. But if we are not going to invest in those, whatever they are, heal them, then they can't hunt with us anymore. We are lessened. We need to make that pivot. And so with our institutions, those need to be revitalized. I mean, we need science back. We need our government back as a vehicle, a virtuous vehicle for our country, and not just dismiss it. Oh, government's bad. It's like, no, our lawyers. Everybody dismisses lawyers. Like, they're the glue that holds our system together. Heal them. And so that's part of the faith, you know, or even the kinship system. I'd bundle that under kinship as well.
Yeah. Ultimately, we have to continue to reinvest into people, into processes, and into systems, right? We can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. This sucked.
Yeah, we're throwing
Let's
ourselves
get rid of
out.
it. Yeah, we throw ourselves out. And as we come to the end of the podcast, we have a tradition. The podcast is called Carrots and Sticks, which has an accountability element to it.
Yeah.
So we always ask the guest to think about a challenge that takes 2 weeks that would push them to live a little bit more courageously.
A 2-week challenge.
Yeah.
For me, that would be the recommitment to the next book I'm working on. And I'm really busy right now with a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I have backburnered that. And so I am no longer a pro.
Yeah.
I have surrendered my professionalism based on other things. And so that challenge to be accepted would be reclaiming my professionalism as an author.
And what would that look like?
Every day.
In the next 2 weeks?
Every day.
You will write?
Yeah, every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be great or productive, but it would mean that I show up at the gym every day.
Yeah. And if it's 30 minutes, show up.
One paragraph.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And the stick portion of that is you create your own accountability for that, as if I don't write every day for the next 2 weeks, I now have to X, or I lose X.
I would lose my integrity. I would lose my ethos.
Yeah.
And my wife's a big one, you know. And I have a lot of good men on my team.
Yeah.
Who I behave honorably towards.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well,
deal.
Thanks for coming on.
That's a deal.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay.
Oh, you'll be right.
What's yours?
I can do one.
What's your 2-week challenge?
I'll come up with a 2-week challenge. You know what it is? I've been really putting off doing clipping and like clipping for the podcast, doing different clips on different social media platforms.
Okay.
Posting shorter versions of it. And partially it's because I don't have the time. And then another part of it is because I am like, if I put in this extra investment of all these hours, is it going to bring me anything? And so it's a fear of failure, a fear of not wanting to do a bunch of more work without any promise of a return. And so,
but that's what pros do.
Yep. And that's what pros do. So I guess my commitment for the 2 weeks would be to, at least on one social media channel, clip up 3 of my podcasts and then actually send out clips for those on that social media channel. Deal.
My man. All right.
Well,
this was super fun, man.
Yeah, this was so great. Where can people find you if you want to be found? Where can people reach out?
Let's see. My website is mywolftribe.com. That has a lot of resources on it. And my name is Philip Folsom. So Google me.
Easy to find.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram, Philip Folsom, or Wolf Tribe.
Yeah. Well,
or
awesome.
LinkedIn.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.